Hi everyone, and welcome back to our series of clips on effective strategies for leaders in the workplace. So we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion over the next couple weeks. But I wanted to start that series of discussions with a little bit of a story or an analogy called Fleas in a Jar. Now, if you've already heard this, I'm going to provide a slightly different look at how the fleas in the jar analogy connects to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, both for leaders and for employees. So the story goes like this. In the 1800s, everyone is familiar that there were actual flea circuses. And people would wonder, well, how do the trainers get the fleas to not jump out, right? How do they get them to not jump away? Well, what the trainers did was they conditioned the fleas. And how they did that was they would put the fleas in a jar and put the lid on top of the jars. So naturally, in an effort to escape, the fleas would jump as hard and as high as they could. And every time they jumped, they'd hit the top of the lid. After jumping that way for so many times, the flea gets conditioned to learn that I'm not going to continue to expend the same amount of energy to jump as high because I'm just hurting myself. And my efforts are going unrecognized and unfulfilled. So after a while, the fleas start to jump to about this high because it doesn't hurt and it doesn't take as much energy. And then they jump to about this high because they can have success at that level without hurting themselves. Well, the same can be true for leaders and employees. Are you a leader who puts the lid on the jar for your employees? And I want you to think about that a little bit. So let's talk about what that means. As leaders, naturally, when we're in staff meetings, we're in small staff gatherings, we encourage, we incite, we excite our employees and encourage them to share their ideas, come to us with helpful strategies, ideas that they're excited about, maybe some tips on how we can reach a certain audience better and be more effective in our roles. But what happens when that employee actually does that? What happens when an employee comes to you with this great idea or this really productive strategy for how either you can be more effective as a leader or how we can encourage members of another group to come and to grow and to thrive in the organization? Sometimes leaders who lead with power, and that's kind of the key word, leaders who lead with power put that lid on the jar. And they'll come back with things like, no, I don't think that's really hitting the mark, or no, that's not really what I was looking for, or incessant questions that really kind of negate the employee's effort to provide this, exciting new strategy. And sometimes the leader just says, we don't really have the budget for that, but I want you to go back and think about it again. So the next staff meeting, when the employees come back, they're still excited. They've not been conditioned to not jump as high and hit their head. They're coming back with other ideas. Hey, what do you think about this? Or maybe they want to grow and they're saying, hey, I'd like to grow. Here's where I've been really successful. What does the leader who leads with power do? They come back and they say, no, you're not quite ready. You don't have the skill set. You've not met the leadership competencies yet. Or they say, you know what, still not in the budget, or our senior leadership is not really on the same page. They're putting that lid on. And after 2 or 3 times of this, the next time the employee is not going to come to you with strategies, ideas, thoughts about a particular process, or even thoughts about how you're doing as a leader, because they don't want to continue to hit their heads on that lid. So they're going to jump a little less high. Then pretty soon, they stop jumping at all. They stop reaching for that next pinnacle. They stop thinking about the idea that they can grow in the organization, they can contribute effectively and successfully, because every time they do, they're met with the lid on the jar. But as an employee, what accountability do you have in this process? As an employee, it's important for you to recognize that you have the potential. When you recognize that the lid is being put on that jar and kind of thwarting your efforts at being a contributing member of this organization, then it's time for you to speak up. Then it's time to come with the answers before you even asked for the answers. It's time to consider all of the options. It's time for you to come with a competitive advantage and competitive strategies for how you thwart that lid on the jar syndrome. If you're a new leader coming into a situation where you're replacing another leader and you recognize that lids have been placed on the jars where the employees are or where your colleagues or your coworkers are, this is a prime opportunity for you to build trust and engagement with your employee base and take those lids off of the jar and say, this is your opportunity. And when someone is brave enough to take that first step and try to leap out of that jar and bring you those ideas and those strategies and that energy and that excitement about how they can be an individual contributor, how they can contribute to not only your success, but their success and the success of the organization, take the time to actively listen to those ideals. Take the time to strategize with the employee and take the time to provide honest feedback about how maybe we can integrate some of those ideals into the organizational structure, or at the very least into the team structure. And then recognize and acknowledge that employee for bringing those ideas up and being bold enough and brave enough to share them with the team. So next week, we're going to talk about how that lid in the jar thinking impacts diverse, equitable, and inclusive strategies in the workplace for leaders. So I'm thrilled that you were able to join me today. Next week, we're going to talk about diversity, which is the first part in our 3-series clip. And if you'd like more information or one-on-one consultation, please feel free to subscribe to my channel and to reach out to Melanie at engageandlead.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.